Ethan Caldwell woke before dawn, as he always did. The glass walls of his Hudson River mansion reflected the gray light of a New York morning, clean and cold, like the life he had carefully constructed. At 42, Ethan was a billionaire whose name appeared regularly in business. Magazines, visionary, ruthless, brilliant. Control was his religion. Routine was his comfort. He moved through the kitchen in silence, barefoot on Italian marble, checking his phone as numbers updated across global markets. Everything was stable. Everything was his. On the counter waited his morning tonic, poured into a crystal glass. Pale gold, faintly steaming. The chef prepared it fresh every day, an expensive blend of herbs and supplements, tailored by private doctors to optimize longevity. Ethan had drunk it for months without question. Maria Alvarez stood near the sink, hands folded in front of her apron. She was the housemaid, small and quiet, someone Ethan barely noticed despite seeing her daily. She cleaned, she served, she disappeared. That was the arrangement. Ethan lifted the glass. "Don't drink it!" The scream shattered the silence like breaking glass. Ethan froze mid-motion, the rim of the glass barely touching his lips. He turned slowly, disbelief hardening into anger. Maria stood rigid, her face drained of color, eyes wide with terror. Not defiance, not insolence, but something raw and desperate. "What did you just say?" Ethan asked, his voice low and dangerous. Maria took a step toward him. "Please, sir." "Put it down. Don't drink any more." Two security guards near the doorway shifted their weight, alert now. Ethan felt the familiar rush of irritation. He hated disorder. He hated interruptions. "You've crossed a line," he said. "Step away from me and leave this house. You're fired." Maria shook her head violently. "I don't care if you fire me. I don't care if they arrest me. If you drink that, you're going to die." The word die hung in the air. Ethan laughed once, sharp and humorless. "This is insane." "I saw it," she said, her voice trembling. "Last night, after midnight." The chef came back into the kitchen. He added something to the bottle, a small vial. "Clear liquid? No label." Ethan glanced at the glass. It looked identical to every other morning, harmless, perfect. "You expect me to believe my own staff is trying to poison me?" he said. "I expect you to believe me because I've seen this before," Maria whispered. Tears slid down her cheeks. "My brother was in a medical trial. He got sick slowly. Doctors said it was natural. It wasn't. This looks the same." For the first time, Ethan felt a flicker of unease. Not fear yet, but doubt. The kind he hadn't allowed into his life in years. He lowered the glass and placed it carefully on the counter. Security moved closer, but Ethan raised a hand to stop them. His eyes stayed on Maria. "If this is a lie," he said quietly, "you've just destroyed your life." Maria met his gaze, shoulders shaking. "If it's the—" Ethan sat alone in his private office as the first rays of sunlight slid across the floor, turning the room a dull shade of gold. The untouched glass of tonic sat sealed in an evidence bag on the desk, suddenly transformed from a symbol of health into something quietly threatening. He had ordered the house locked down within minutes of Maria's outburst. The chef detained, security protocols rewritten in real time. Control, once shaken, was now being reclaimed. His personal physician arrived before breakfast, followed by a discreet toxicology specialist flown in from Boston. Blood samples were drawn. The contents of the tonic were analyzed. No one spoke while the machines hummed. When the results finally came, the doctor's expression had changed. "This compound isn't supposed to be here," he said carefully. "It's not detectable in standard screenings. Whoever added it knew exactly what they were doing." Ethan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "What does it do?" "It accumulates," the doctor replied. "Slowly damages vital organs, kidneys first, then the liver, eventually the heart." Ethan felt a tightness in his chest. "How long?" The doctor hesitated. "If exposure continues, 3 to 6 months. You've likely been ingesting small doses for weeks." For a moment the room seemed unreal. Ethan Caldwell didn't get sick. He didn't become a victim. Those things happened to other people, people who failed to plan. "Stop it," Ethan said. "Now!" "The damage can't be undone easily," the specialist added. "But stopping further exposure is critical." Security footage was reviewed frame by frame. At 12:47 a.m., the chef returned to the kitchen alone. The camera caught the subtle motion of a vial emptied into the tonic container, the bottle shaken gently, deliberately. By morning, the chef had vanished. His phone was disconnected. His apartment empty. Ethan's investigators worked fast, too fast. Within hours, a deeper layer emerged. The chemical compound was not random. It belonged to a shelved experimental drug, one developed by Caldwell Biotech nearly a decade earlier. A drug? Ethan vaguely remembered greenlighting before the project was abruptly shut down. The reason for the shutdown surfaced next: fatal side effects. Internal reports showed early trial, participants suffering the same slow deterioration. The doctors now described. The deaths had been ruled inconclusive. Families compensated quietly. Files sealed. Ethan stared at the digital documents as if they belonged to another man. His signature appeared at the bottom of every authorization. That evening, Maria was brought into the office. She looked exhausted, eyes red from crying, but she stood tall. "My brother was part of that trial," she said before Ethan could speak. "He trusted it would help him. Instead, he died, and no one was held responsible." Ethan swallowed hard. "You think this is revenge?" "I think it's justice, twisted into something cruel," Maria replied. "They didn't want you dead, Qui." The news broke quietly at first, buried beneath market updates and celebrity scandals, but it didn't stay quiet for long. An anonymous tip reached a financial journalist in Boston, then another in New York. By the end of the week, headlines were screaming about a billionaire targeted with his own company's experimental compound. Ethan Caldwell's name dominated every screen. Caldwell Biotech's stock plunged before the opening bell. The board called an emergency meeting and informed Ethan it would be held without him. Lawyers stopped returning his calls. Investors demanded answers he no longer controlled. Inside his body, the damage continued. Ethan's hands began to shake in the mornings. Simple tasks left him exhausted. His doctors adjusted medications, but the truth was brutal. The compound was still working its way through his system, and no one could guarantee it would stop. Federal investigators arrived, followed by subpoenas. Sealed records were forced open. Internal emails Ethan barely remembered writing, surfaced and spread across the internet. In them, he approved settlements, silenced researchers, and labeled fatalities as acceptable risk. The language was clinical, efficient, inhuman. Ethan read the emails late at night, alone, and barely recognized the man behind the words. Maria remained in the house, despite offers to relocate her for her own safety. She brought him water when he forgot to drink, reminded him to eat when nausea took over. There was no bitterness in her care, only distance. One evening, as rain hammered against the glass walls, Ethan finally spoke. "I didn't know it was that bad," he said, his voice hoarse. "If I had known—" "You signed without reading," Maria interrupted calmly. "That was enough." Her words hurt more than any accusation. The board's decision came the next morning. Ethan was asked to resign for the good of the company. The empire he built in 20 years was taken from him in a single-page document. He signed it. That same afternoon, the doctors presented a possibility. An antidote existed, unfinished and unstable, developed during the original trials and abandoned when funding was cut. One dose, the specialist explained. It could reverse the damage, or it could accelerate it. Ethan stared at the syringe resting in a sealed case. Why wasn't it completed? "Too expensive," the doctor said. "And too risky." Maria watched from the doorway. "My brother never had that choice," she said quietly. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. Memories he had buried, meetings, signatures, names he never learned, flooded back. For years, he had told himself results mattered more than people. Now he understood the lie in that belief. By morning, he made his decision. "If this works," he said to Maria, "I'll testify. I'll open everything. No deals." She nodded once. That's all anyone ever wanted. Ethan injected the antidote with steady hands, then leaned back as pain surged through him, fierce and overwhelming.